What's happening, Lions fans? Today we're going to turn the page from the fantastic news we've had over the last couple days regarding the Ben Johnson return. Today we're going to talk about the upcoming free agents for the Detroit Lions in 2024 as we enter next season. There's a long list to go through here. I will try and touch on each individual, but I will spend time on obviously the big names that we come across. As we enter next season, coming off of the devastation that was the loss in the NFC Championship game to the San Francisco 49ers, and there's a video in the archives that goes over the details of why the Detroit Lions lost that football game. We need to make sure the Lions, Brad Holmes, the general manager, the head coach, Dan Campbell, the entire ownership group, including the Ford family and Sheila Ford Hamp, they need to be very picky and choosy with who they bring in. And I don't think that's going to be a problem because they've built this culture around Dan Campbell, around Brad Holmes, around this idea of grit, and they want players to shine in that same light. They have a very good core on this team already that everyone's excited to move forward with. And although they fell short this year, they really have a great group of guys to move forward with. So we're going to go through the current group of free agents that they have listed going into the offseason. Let's start with the biggest name, I think, on this list, and that is safety C.J. Garnder-Johnson. He is 26 years old. He was on a 1-year, what they call a prove-it deal, coming in from Philadelphia. He was a Pro Bowler last year. Led the league in interceptions. So they expected a lot from him. Unfortunately, he had the pectoral injury, I believe it was in week 2, and had to sit out the majority of the season. He came back at the very end of the year, played during the playoffs, and he did make some plays. He did have a few interceptions, got himself involved. But the problem with C.J. Gardner-Johnson is a lot of baggage comes along with that. He has a lot of social media presence. He does a lot of talking both on and off the field. And I just don't think that that's a part of what this culture is. I don't think that's something that the organization and Dan Campbell really want to deal with long term. So I don't think that C.J. Gardner-Johnson is going to be someone that they're going to sign and bring back next year. I really don't. Unfortunately, that's going to be a tough one to lose. That's some talent that it's going to be tough to lose. But the truth is, that is one of the position groups for the Lions that they do have some guys waiting in the wings. I mean, Brian Branch is a fantastic rookie safety. Ife Melifonwu, we talked about in previous videos as well, has really stepped up. They already have Kirby Joseph. So they have a good group of safeties. I think they could recover and move on from this. Defensive end Romeo Okwara. We know we had both Okwara brothers on the team at one point. The other Okwara brother was let go late in the season to make room for other acquisitions and just wasn't very productive. Romeo Okwara, 29 years old, kind of up in the air. I don't think he's given the ultimate production that they've expected out of him. He signed a deal a few years back, and I just don't think they've gotten exactly everything out of him that they've needed. Obviously, they fell short this year, and one of the biggest needs is on the defensive line. Defensive end is a huge need going into next season. It is a top priority. So I think that he is expendable because of that. I think you're going to find a few new folks on that position group as we enter next season. So I would say Romeo Okwara is probably not coming back next year. I think this also applies to defensive end Charles Harris. He's the same age, 29 years old, and I think the writing was on the wall with Charles Harris. He just did not give the production that we needed from him. So again, I don't think he will be coming back, and we will replace him either via the draft or with other free agents. Cornerback Emmanuel Mosley. Unfortunately, we know his story. Came from San Francisco, had some injury problems there, but we thought that once he was on the mend here, that with his talent and what he showed prior to that injury, that good things were going to happen. Unfortunately, the Lions only got a handful of snaps out of him when I think it was the other knee, the MCL or ACL that went. So unfortunately, they lost him for the year and just didn't get to see what the potential could have been. It's really unfortunate, too, because they struggled at cornerback that is the other top priority need, in my opinion, along with defensive line, either interior or on the end to help Hutch. I think that the Lions need someone at cornerback, someone to help Cam Sutton. Although he's a good cornerback, he is not a number one guy. He's not a Sauce Gardner or some of the other cornerbacks that you could just rely on and put him on an island. Cam is just not that athletic, in my opinion, enough to where he can cover those big-time wide receivers. And you saw the Lions struggle several weeks towards the end of the year and even through the playoffs. They just could not cover those big-time wide receivers and continued to give up huge plays. So cornerback Emanuel Mosley, unfortunately, with the injury concerns, with the fact that I think they're going to, again, probably go heavy in free agency and in the draft to replace him and then add cornerbacks to the group, I think he will not be back next year. Guard Graham Glasgow. He is 32 years old, so he's getting at it towards the end of his career. However, he really filled in well. Our other guard, Vaitai, just cannot remain healthy. He is also on this list, and I just think between him and Vaitai, Glasgow will be brought back. He can play both guard positions, so he's really good to have. He's a great depth piece, and obviously he started a majority of the games this year and could do so again next year, depending on what they do in the draft or if they make a move in free agency. It's never a bad thing to continue to bolster up your offensive line. I think they're going to need to make some moves. Now, that brings us to maybe the biggest piece of the offensive line that's a free agent this year, and that's the other guard position, Jonah Jackson. He's 27 years old. He was injured at the end of this last year, did not play in the game in San Francisco, and although the offensive line held up well, it would have been nice to have him there. In his case, this is a tough one, right? I think this might be another huge decision. Along with Garnder-Johnson, this might be the other one where, it might be just tough to say goodbye in this case. Jonah Jackson is a fantastic guard. He still has plenty of years left in his belt, and although he has injuries, and I would say is an injury concern for us if you're going to bring him back, other teams, I think, will look at him as a positive and will want to pay him. He's going to demand some money in that guard position. He's going to be offered money elsewhere, and you're going to either have to match that big money or let him go. And if I'm making the decision now, I would say they let him go. I think they do something in the draft and or free agency to replace guard or to at least bolster the guard position to where they are willing to maybe let him go because they don't want to pay him that money. Let's just be truthful. I think his injury concerns, the fact that they might be able to fill that position in other ways without having to pay that money. They know they have to allocate those funds to other players, Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, a ton of contracts down the road. So I think this is the expendable one. I think this is where you let the money walk and say goodbye to Jonah Jackson. Tackle Dan Skipper. Everyone loves the skip, right? Big skip. Unfortunately, I think, again, he's probably one of those guys that is not a super top priority. He's super versatile. He can fill in all over the offensive line. I even is in those eligible tackle situations able to be versatile and athletic. So I'm not saying he's not valuable. I just don't think that it's a priority. So he might be a guy that, you kind of let walk and then bring him back sometime during the year when you need him, get him back on the practice squad. I mean, it all depends on what they do here in free agency and in the draft. But that's where I would put Dan Skipper. Another big one, kicker Michael Badgley. He's 29 years old. We talked about it in the video regarding why the Lions lost, and it certainly wasn't Michael Badgley because he didn't get an opportunity. He didn't get a ton of opportunities, and he really wasn't terrible this year. So the problem on the other side is they certainly weren't in love with him. I mean, as much as he didn't get opportunities, maybe the reason is because they didn't trust him. They didn't have the faith in him. So if that's the case, and I think I'm leaning that way, I think he probably walks, and they're looking for a kicker somewhere this offseason. Wide receiver Josh Reynolds, 29 years old, another big time review here because, the Reynolds thing, he kind of leaves a sour taste in your mouth, right? Coming out of the NFC Championship, it's really unfortunate that he had key drops in horrible spots when the Lions needed plays to be made. A fourth down, the first fourth down that he was aggressive and went for, and he dropped a pass. I mean, he should have had that catch. And then there was a third down play when they went 3 and out before the punt, and I think before the Gibbs fumble, and he dropped a pass, and it could have gone for a big play and could have meant a big drive and momentum swing, and it didn't happen. So he leaves a very sour taste in your mouth, but the truth is, Josh Reynolds has been a huge piece for the Lions for a long time, a very unsung hero for this organization. He's reliable, available. Goff trusts him from years in San Francisco, with the Rams. I think Brad Holmes is the same light. So I know they like Josh Reynolds. I think they'll probably do everything they can to bring him back. It will all depend on what else happens in the room, if a free agent comes into the mix. But I still think he remains with the team. I think they do what they can to sign him. Quarterback Tedd Bridgewater. That's sort of already been decided. He did come out and already told the Detroit Free Press that he was retiring after the season. Safety Will Harris. Another one of those expendable safeties because of how deep the room is. I don't think if we're bringing back Garnder-Johnson, we're also probably not bringing back Harris. Linebacker Jalen Reeves-Maybin, huge special teams component. He actually filled in well for Derek Barnes during the playoffs and got in the mix a little bit there towards the end. He's a great tackler, and again, he is just a fantastic special teams player. I don't think that's a guy the Lions want to lose. I mean, that's a jack-of-all-trades linebacker. I think you want to keep him in the mix. I think they do what they can to bring him back. I didn't even realize quarterback Nate Sudfeld was still on the roster. I think he's gone. Tackle Matt Nelson, very expendable. Here's the other linebacker, Julian Okwara. We know what happened with him. Long snapper Jake McQuaide. Again, that will all depend on what their situation is. If they need a long snapper and he's available and wants to go another season at 36 years old, they will try and bring him back. Running back Craig Reynolds on this list as well. At 28 years old, he was a key piece, another unsung hero along with Josh Reynolds, no relation there. But Craig Reynolds had scored the touchdown against the Bucs in the playoffs, had also been very key early on in the season when they had injuries at linebacker. So I think they do what they can to bring him back. He has a great depth piece. He's a hardworking guy. Coaching staff loves him. He will be back. Cornerback Kindle Vildor, 26 years old, certainly has years left and did fill in well. I don't want to, again, another guy that kind of leaves a sour taste in your mouth because he was put in some tough spots. I think, number one, he's playing behind Cam Sutton, who already is in the number one. So it bumps up Vildor into a spot where he's covering the second best wide receiver on any team. And against the Vikings and against the Cowboys and the Rams and the Bucks and the Niners, you need two corners. And that puts Vildor in a tough spot. And it certainly did in the NFC Championship game. So I think he's also expendable. However, if they need depth, it's not a terrible piece to have. Him as a third or fourth cornerback, I like. Him as a second quarterback, I don't like. Fullback Jason Kabinda, that's always been a touch and go. I think he's a year on, year off kind of guy. I think they just kind of assess the situation, see if they do need a fullback and make him an offer if so. If not, he is expendable. Now we move into our restricted free agents. And for anybody who's not aware, restricted free agent actually just means an unrestricted free agent means a player is free to go anywhere. However, a restricted free agent, that player is still contracted by that current team. If another team wants that player, they must buy them or give compensation for that player. So Lions have a few restricted free agents. Tight end Zane Zylstra, long snapper Scott Daly, tight end Brock Wright, defensive tackle Benito Jones, linebacker Anthony Pittman. Now, out of those guys, I think the tight end position you have to look at, Brock Wright, they do like, I know that, so I think he comes back. He's the youngest of those two, so I think it makes Zylstra then expendable. The long snapper, again, is just an assessment of what they need, and they'll make the decision. Benito Jones was kind of an off and on player. It really will depend on what they want to do on the defensive line over the draft and in free agency. Wide receiver Donovan Peoples-Jones is also listed here, not as restricted or under exclusive rights. So again, I think they assess the room. Jamison Williams, I think, is kind of primed to take the next step. So that may make Peoples-Jones expendable, but let's see what happens. If I have to make a decision, I say he's probably not back. But if they just don't make a move at receiver, who knows with him? I wouldn't be upset if they did. Cornerback Khalil Dorsey, running back Zonovan Knight, Jerry Jacobs, and outside linebacker James Houston, all exclusive rights free agents. Now that gets a little more into the woods, so we don't really want to go there. I think James Houston they want to bring back, so I wouldn't be concerned with that. I think Jerry Jacobs is definitely gone based on his demotion during the mid-year. And then the other couple players we listed there, Khalil Dorsey, a special teams player, Zonovan Knight, a backup running back. I think, again, you kind of assess the room on both sides and decide if you need them or not. Both those guys expendable. So a long list there of guys. I think we've gone through them here in some detail. Again, I think they have some work to do. I think Ben Johnson coming back, I think, knowing they have to make some serious moves and add guys on defense, we're going to see some movement here. So I'm excited. I appreciate you allowing me to go through it with you. I hope you guys have a fantastic, fantastic day. Come back and see me. We'll go through the potential free agents the Lions could bring in as we enter next season. Look forward to that one. We'll see you guys on the next one.